All right, this week we're talking about utilitarianism, which is a long word, but it's phonetic. And we have been talking about the origin of morality, where morality comes from, and we saw several possible responses to this, and there were problems with all of them. So that's kind of left a little bit open-ended. And now we're switching gears to theories that try to give us a practical guide on how we know what we're supposed to do in any given situation, as well as what makes something right and wrong. Now, we skipped over chapter 6, which is the social contract theory. We're going to come back to that next week. I think utilitarianism is an easier access point into this type of discussion. And chapter 7 primarily gives you some specific examples through the guise of how a utilitarian would interpret them. And chapter 8 is more the pros and the cons. And I'm not crazy about the way that it's structured because it basically gives you the criticisms of it. And then later on at the end, how a utilitarian responds to those criticisms. And I don't think it's super obvious. And they don't spend a lot of time necessarily talking about the strengths. So that's what I want to do. So the foundation of utilitarianism is in what we call the principle of utility, which says an action is morally right if it causes the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. Now, a few things to notice about this. First, the outcome is all that matters. Your intentions, your motivation, none of that. Only the outcome of your actions. Second, that outcome only matters insofar as it makes people happy or it makes people miserable. There's nothing else that gets factored in. And third is that it's what we call impartial, which means everybody gets a vote and every vote counts equally. So when this started out, it was a political theory turned ethical theory that was pretty radical at the time, particularly because of its focus on everybody counting equally. It's the first positive thing that we'll talk about with utilitarianism. It's impartial. So it doesn't matter if you are homeless or president of the United States. If you are the richest person in the world or a nobody broke student, your vote counts equally. And that seems like a very good thing. We like that. We want a theory that takes everybody into account and doesn't give special credence to specific people, regardless of their circumstances. The second good thing about it is that it's pretty user-friendly. We're going to see some options coming up here in a few weeks that are going to be a lot more complicated, and there's a lot more that we're going to have to factor in and figure out and take into account when we are thinking about what action we should take. And here it's just, are you making more people happier than anything else you could have done? Good, then do it. If there's something else you could do that would make more people happy or decrease the amount of misery that people are experiencing, then that's what you should have done instead. I also think, piggybacking on this, it's pretty intuitive. I think a lot of us use utilitarian calculations when we do face ethical dilemmas. So if a friend confides a secret in me, asks that I not tell anybody, I might promise to keep that secret and be trustworthy. Then if maybe another friend comes and says, oh, did so-and-so talk to you about this? Now I either have to lie, which is wrong, and keep the secret, or I have to tell the truth and betray the trust of my friend and break my promise, which is wrong. So when I try to figure out what to do here, most of us are probably going to run some sort of utilitarian-like calculation. We're going to ask ourselves, what would make the most people happy in this outcome? And that's probably going to depend upon what the secret was about, if the person that is trying to get information is going to use it to be harmful or spread rumors or whatever the case is. And we're probably going to act in such a way as to try to promote happiness amongst those that we care about. So it's kind of intuitive, I think, in that way. Another good thing about it is that it gives us moral flexibility, meaning that it allows for exceptions. Nothing is always morally wrong for a utilitarian. And this is a good thing because we want to be able to make exceptions. So yes, lying is wrong unless maybe you're protecting somebody's feelings. Definitely if you're saving an innocent life. Maybe, we make these exceptions all the time. Killing is wrong unless it's in self-defense. Maybe war, maybe doctor-assisted suicide, maybe capital punishment, depending on the viewpoints. So because of all these things, it's impossible for an ethical theory to lay out every possible circumstance you could ever be in and give you a very specific prescription on what the right thing to do in that circumstance would be. It's just not possible. So instead, we have to have a very generalized account. And for most theories, that's going to mean a lot of things are going to fall through the cracks. And they're not going to allow for exceptions because it's just too difficult to explain under what circumstances you can make an exception. and under what circumstances you can't when you're dealing with a very generalized theory. But utilitarianism can do that by just saying, no, nothing's always morally wrong. It always depends on context and circumstances. If those are positive things that make people happy, it's good. If they were negative things that made people miserable, then it's bad. But there's also bad things with utilitarianism. Your book points out this idea that there are some things that are more important than happiness, including making sure we avoid injustice and violating individual rights, which may come at the expense of happiness. And a lot of utilitarians are going to say, well, in the long run, because we have to factor out all the possible outcomes, injustice and violating rights are not going to create the most happiness, because people are probably going to find out and be really upset that that happened. But they can't guarantee that's necessarily going to happen all the time. Another bad thing about it that a lot of people don't like is they say that it's way too demanding. I have to constantly be trying to make everybody else happy. And yeah, I get a vote, but so does everybody else. And that very well may mean I have to sacrifice myself for the happiness of others. For example, if I happen to be in a bank and let's say robbers came and held 50 people hostage and said, if one of you volunteers to die, we'll kill you and let everybody else go. If nobody volunteers, we're just going to systematically kill everybody until you're all dead. A utilitarian would tell you that you have to volunteer because it's one person's happiness versus 50 plus all of their loved ones. Your loved ones get factored in too, but still, 50 people probably are going to have more combined happiness than your side will have misery. And it seems a bit extreme to a lot of people that utilitarians would require us to sacrifice ourselves for others. But utilitarians often respond to this by saying, so, did you think that it would be easy to be a morally good person? If it was really that simple to be a virtuous person, then we would all be really great people. The fact is that it really is that hard to be a good person. Another bad thing about it is that it's very hard for us to know what the outcome of our actions is going to be ahead of time, especially when we don't necessarily know how many people are going to be affected by our actions and how they're going to feel about it. So I might be able to gauge how, my close friends or my family members would react to my behavior, but I certainly can't always predict that, and I definitely can't predict that about strangers, especially if I'm not even sure that they're being affected by my choices. And if it's the total possible outcome, then that means I could die and there could still be ramifications later, and I might never know whether or not I made the right choice. And a lot of people aren't going to like that. Some of the other bad things, oftentimes something that's a really good thing is also a really bad thing. And that's the case here with a couple of these strengths. So impartiality, everybody's vote counts equally. That's great when we're talking about particularly people who are normally oppressed or marginalized, and utilitarians have been on the forefront of pretty much every social equality movement. Some of the first people to write against slavery because they thought all races deserved equal consideration and treatment. John Stuart Mill, the person who is attached to utilitarianism, wrote on the subjugation of women way back in 1840 when nobody, at least no males, were talking about why women should be thought of equal at all. And now a lot of utilitarians are big on animal rights as well and fighting for better treatment of animals. So impartiality is maybe a good thing when we're talking about that kind of stuff, but it also means that you don't get to give special consideration to the people that you care about. So your child versus a stranger count equally. Your vote versus somebody else's vote count equally. And we're all going to naturally give special credence to the people that we care about. But utilitarianism doesn't let us do that. And in fact, only one theory we're going to look at is going to let you do that. So a lot of people have a hard time with that. And then the other thing that's both good and bad is this moral flexibility. So nothing is always morally wrong. That's great. We like exceptions. But what that means is there's nothing inherently wrong about slavery or rape or genocide. Now, we can say that maybe every time it's ever been done, it's created more misery than happiness. But if there was some sort of scenario where genocide or rape or slavery actually would make a lot more people happy than miserable, then utilitarians would have to be okay with it, at least from a theoretical standpoint. Now, maybe that would never happen, but if it does, it's hard for us to really reconcile that with a utilitarian framework. So as with all theories, there are good things, there are bad things. Your book gives you a lot more that we didn't talk about, but hopefully this gives you a little bit better understanding of what the theory is. Make sure you do the reading, The quiz will be up by the time you see this, and let me know if you have any questions.